Okay, another episode of my WandaVision recap series. This one's going to be a little bit different. I actually have a couple of things going on today, so you won't get like all of the different pictures and images like I had on the first three episodes, but we're still going to talk about this. This episode, I really like this episode. It was really the first episode that I think was a actual real episode. The first three episodes of WandaVision so far has kind of been mimicked all of these different eras in television, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. But this episode, episode 4, was the very first one where it felt like a real, what you would expect and everything. If you were kind of iffy on the first three, this is the first one that kind of put you in the mind of probably what a lot of people were expecting. And we will get in on that right after the intro. Welcome back to the DL Jones Books channel. I'm your host, DL Jones, and this channel, I talk about all type of story-related topics. It could be anything versus TV shows, movies, audiobooks, anything that has a story could potentially be a topic on my show. Now, this episode, we're going to be continuing my WandaVision recap series. This is going to be me recapping WandaVision episode 4. Before we get started, I want to let everybody know that this episode will contain spoilers. I will be spoiling everything that happened in episode 4 and potentially, previous episodes, being that, a lot of these episodes are relative to each other. So if you're listening to this episode and haven't watched the show yet, you might want to go ahead and pause it, go back and watch the show, and then come back here and watch this particular episode. Also, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button and press like, give it a like. I heard that if you like one of my videos, you could win a brand new car. Not for me, but you could possibly win a brand new car if you like one of the videos. Not for me though, but you might want to go ahead and hit that like button just in case, just to make sure that you have that opportunity. Okay, so this episode starts in the real world. It doesn't start off in one of Wanda's TV show realities. It starts off in the real world, and the first thing we see is Monica Rambeau. And now she, if you remember from the last episode, the last thing we saw is her getting thrown out of Wanda's reality, and she's surrounded by a bunch of agents and stuff. So this one takes place. It looks like they back up a little bit, and it takes place. Monica Rambeau is sitting in the hospital. She's sitting in a chair, and she just appears. It's like a reverse dusted, sort of like what happened at the end of Infinity War when Thanos snapped his finger and everybody dusted. This looks like it takes place at the end of Endgame when they brought everybody back. So Monica Rambeau just appears, and she's sitting in a chair in a hospital room, and the bed beside her is empty. So she gets out the bed. She walks through the hallway, and as she's walking through the hallway, you can see everybody reappearing again. It looks like everybody's coming back from their 5-year from the snap. So while she's there, she goes and asks one of the nurses about her mother, because it looks like I'm guessing from what's going on in the show, it looks like she was there visiting her mother. Her mother was in the hospital, and she finds out that her mother had passed away three years prior, which of course they were snapped away for 5 years, so they have 5 years of their life missing. And she finds out that her mother passed away 3 years prior. Next, it jumps to, looks like we're at SWORD headquarters, and Monica is showing up. It looks like it's after everybody returned from the snap. She waited about 3 weeks before she showed up at SWORD headquarters, and I'm guessing during this time she was some type of SWORD agent or whatever. And they mentioned the fact that she's the first person to return since the snap, and they mentioned the fact that everybody returned 3 weeks, but she's the first one to show up at headquarters to report for duty. Now, while she's there, she ended up finding out that she had been taken off of certain types of assignments that she had before, and everybody that was snapped, that had been gone in the snap, had been relocated to just local assignment. And she also finds out that this new rule that they set up for people was actually something written up by her mother, who had passed away 3 years earlier. But her mother, who was also a part of SWORD, she was the one that wrote up this new rule that, when people return, if they return, that they are supposed to be relegated to just domestic assignments and not going off world and stuff like that. She was a little bit upset about it, but then she eventually just left to meet her new assignment partner. Now, the person she ended up meeting was Agent Woo. And if you remember Agent Woo, he was the FBI agent that kind of kept tabs on Ant-Man in the Ant-Man movie when he was he was on house arrest, and Agent Wu was the person that kind of kept up with him. Now, Agent Wu is the FBI agent that Monica Rambeau goes to meet up with. She meets him out in front of the Westview sign. The Westview, city of Westview, that the whole stuff that's going on with Wanda is taking place. So she meets him outside of the Westview sign. She has no idea what's going on. There's two other police officers standing out there. So Agent Wu, as she questioned Agent Wu about what they're doing out there, Agent Wu lets her know that, these two officers think that Westview doesn't exist. So they talk to the officers and they're like, Westview doesn't exist, even though they see the sign right there. Now, after the two officers leave, Monica, she sends a drone down the street because Agent Wu had mentioned that, they haven't gone into that city, and they tried to, and it seemed like something was stopping them from going there. So she sent the drone, through down the street, trying to send a drone into the city, and all of a sudden the drone hits a spot and disappears. She walks up and she investigates it a little bit, and she notices that there is some type of force field, look like it's around the city. And she touches the force field and see that her hand is kind of going through it. So Agent Wu kind of warns her not to get too close, but she goes ahead and she gets real close to the force field, and she sticks her hand through it. Next you know, the energy field or whatever it is sucks her through, and she disappears. Next, it jumps to 24 hours later. And what you see 24 hours later, you see Kat Dennings' character, Dr. Lewis. If you remember her, she was in the first Thor movie. Well, she's in there, and I'm guessing she is like some kind of big time character now. She's really been promoted since the Thor movie. Now, she's in the back of a truck and she's going to this facility, and you get there and you find out it is that makeshift base facility that you see at the end of episode 3 of WandaVision with all of the sword agents and all of this kind of stuff. So she goes there, and they know about something going on in this Westview. It's like surrounding Westview, and they're monitoring that area and everything. So while she's there, she started doing some tests, and she noticed a frequency, just a weird, odd frequency. And after a little investigation, she realizes that if she got an old television and connected it with the frequency, she would then see actual video footage of what's going on inside that town, which is, if you remember at the end of episode 1, they have that scene where there's a television sitting on a desk with all of this modern equipment, and on that television, it's like an old school television, it's actually showing Wanda and Vision's life as if it was a TV show. So come to find out now in this episode that was Kat Dennings watching that. She was the one that discovered how to watch what was going on in Westview, and she got the TV set up and everything like that. It looked like some time went by, and they got to where they're watching this show, what's going on. They realize that it's happening in real time. They realize it's something that is created, and somehow they're able to use that frequency that they found to view what's going on. And while they're doing that, they start cataloging all of the people that's in Westview, and they had like a board, and they cataloging all those people, showing the real person and the character that they're playing in Wanda's world, which is kind of like a sitcom. After a little more investigation, Dr. Lewis, which is Kat Dennings' character, she kind of had the idea that, if we can watch what's going on using this frequency, maybe we can use the same frequencies to try to contact Wanda. So she noticed that there was a radio that shows up. It only shows up certain times during the episodes, which to them, they were being shown what was going on as if it was a television episode. So she said if they can dial into that frequency, maybe they can get a message to Wanda. So while they're doing that, SWORD has also decided to try to send somebody into Westview by going under their town. They didn't know if there's reality. They didn't know how far below the ground the reality went. So they thought that maybe they can send somebody into Westview by using like the underground sewage pipes and stuff like that, climbing in under it and coming up and seeing what's going on. And you later find out that was how the beekeeper from the end of episode 2 ended up in that world. It actually was just a regular SWORD agent in regular type of clothes, but once he passed that threshold, everything changes to like the era of that television series. So that's how we found out. That's how the beekeeper gets in there, because he ended up changing from just a guy in like a yellow hazmat type suit into like a beekeeper suit with the bees following him as he crossed the threshold of Westview, even though he was underground. While watching the video, they got to a point where the radio was on screen again, and she got Agent Woo to dial into this frequency and try to contact Wanda. And then you have the scene where Wanda was talking to Dottie, and you hear someone come across the radio saying, "Who's doing this to you?" They show that scene, that same scene from outside of Wanda's world, where Agent Woo is actually holding the mic and trying to contact her. You know, they still don't know what's going on, but that was pretty interesting. They showed from the other side. So now you know that Agent Woo was the one that was trying to contact her. He was the one that was talking across the radio. But something funny happened. It's like as soon as he said something, the screen that they was watching kind of like cut to the end of the episode. You know how they're seeing it as episodes of television shows. So the screen kind of ended, like jumped forward a little bit, and they kind of questioned what was going on there. They didn't know what was happening. A little while after that, while watching the show, that's when they saw Monica Rambeau. You know, she was in Wanda's world as Geraldine. That's when they saw her in the world, and she's just sitting there, and they kind of figured, you know, she's in this world. Maybe she's just continuing being undercover, you know, but they saw the scene where Monica Rambeau mentions Ultron, and that's when they realized, you know, she is still playing the role. She's not like being controlled or anything. She's playing the role. And she mentioned Ultron, you know, and then they noticed that Wanda didn't like it, and Wanda kind of snapped out of it. But then all of a sudden what they was watching jumped. It jumped to the end of the episode with Wanda and Vision sitting on a chair with the twins, you know, and they kept rewinding it, trying to figure out what's going on. They don't know what happened. So then at that same moment, they hear an alarm outside of the little facility that they're in, and they go outside to see, you know, what that alarm was for. Once Agent Woo and Dr. Lewis leaves the room, you know, the camera zooms in on the television and it shows what happened. It shows the interaction between Wanda and Monica Rambeau, which Wanda seemed very upset about Monica Rambeau being there, asked her, how does she know about Ultron? What made you bring up Ultron? Then, of course, she ended up saying, you know, you're not a friend. You're not supposed to be here. And then that's when you see Wanda's hands light up with the red, and then she just blasts Monica Rambeau. Sends Monica Rambeau flying through walls, through this front yard, and through the whole town. And then, of course, it sends her outside of Westview, and that's when she lands on the outside. And we get to the part that's at the end of episode 3 where Monica Rambeau is landing on the grass outside and all of the agents come in. So that was pretty interesting, where they actually showed what happened. You know, in the last episode, they showed that Wanda was upset about Monica Rambeau bringing up stuff, but it just skipped. And when it came back, you know, Monica Rambeau, you know, it don't show what happened. All it shows is Monica Rambeau got thrown out of the town. So this kind of lets you know a little more about what happened between that little interaction and how she actually got tossed out of Westview. Next, you have Wanda. She uses her powers. You know, we're back in Wanda's world now watching this part. She uses her powers and she repairs everything, the hole in the wall and everything. And then Vision comes in. He comes in and he asks, you know, where's Geraldine? Just like in episode 3. Now, when Wanda turned around and looked at Vision, a weird thing happened. When she saw Vision, it was Vision with the Mind Stone ripped out of his forehead, and his face and everything. He just looked like he did as he did in Avengers, where, you know, after they killed him, after Thanos took the Mind Stone and just tossed him away. So she kind of like shook her head a little bit for a second and then went back, and everything was back to normal. Vision was looking fine again. And then she asked him, you know, what are we going to watch on TV tonight? And then it jumps to the end of that particular episode where they both are sitting down on the couch with the twins, you know, and they turn on the TV. Now, the last little part of this episode is they go back to Monica Rambeau. You know, everybody is surrounding her. All of the SWORD agents is pulling up, you know, trying to see what's going on. And she's kind of panicked, and she lets them know Wanda is doing this. No one is doing this to her. She's the one that's doing this, you know, and the episode kind of ends there. You know, and that's the whole episode. You know, she lets them know that somebody's not doing this to her. She's doing this herself. She knows full well what she's doing. So like I said, this episode was really the first episode that I felt like people were kind of people that didn't know beforehand what this show was going to be about, and they hear, this is going to be a TV show about Marvel characters. This is probably like the first episode I feel like gave those people what they were expecting. This was the first episode that kind of answered a lot of the questions that was being brought up to you. Now we know that Wanda has created this world. We know that the people, well, I'm not clear on this, but I'm thinking that the people that are in Wanda's city, in Wanda's town, Westview, I'm thinking they are all real people that she brought into that town that are playing roles, because that one scene earlier in the episode, you had Agent Woo and Dr. Lewis. They had like a board up where they was listing up the characters of Wanda's reality TV show and have their real names, listed beside them. So now we know that Wanda's in full control. She's the one that created this world. And I'm very curious as to what's going to happen next. It still doesn't answer a lot of questions about why those people are there and if those people are really other people. Because I know like a lot of people think that her neighbor Agnes, in the comics, there's a witch named Agatha. A lot of people think the neighbor Agnes is a representation of Agatha, the witch from the comics and stuff like that. That kind of stuff, I kind of feel like it's still up in the air. We still got to figure out, all of those type of things. But I think a lot of the initial questions and stuff we had about the world, who's creating the world, is Wanda doing it on her own? Is she being controlled? Is she trapped? A lot of those questions have been answered in this episode. And we know why Monica Rambeau was there. She's there. She didn't enter in the world on purpose, but she is there on behalf of SWORD, trying to investigate what is going on. So that was episode 4 of WandaVision. And this may be the episode that kind of like hooked me. They kind of got me to a point where I'm not just still thinking, I wonder where this is going, to where I'm looking at it now like, I can't wait to see the next episode to find out what's going to happen, So that's episode 4 of WandaVision. That was my recap. Thank you for watching, and make sure you hit subscribe and the like button, and stay tuned for next week when we jump into episode 5. I'm DL Jones. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. You made it to the end of the video. Thank you for watching. While you're here, why don't you check out that video right there, or maybe that one right there. And while you're at it, go ahead and click my image in the middle there and subscribe to this channel.